The third session of the Senate in the second regular session of the 17th Congress is hereby called to order. Senator Joel Villanueva will lead us in prayer.
Let us put ourselves in the presence of the Lord. Almighty God, we come before you, humbling ourselves, knowing that without you, we can do nothing. Lord Jesus, we ask for the forgiveness of our sins in words, in thoughts, and in deeds, and may you cleanse us with your most precious blood shed in Calvary 2,000 years ago. We thank you for this another opportunity that you have given us, that we can serve our country, our people, and especially you, our Lord, our God. Today, as we open today's session, let the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you, our Lord, our God, our Savior, Jesus Christ. Let your name continue to increase, and let us all be decreased. We pray a special prayer for our kababayans, especially in Marawi City, in the entire Mindanao. Let your hedges of protection be upon them, and we ask that you embrace them with your love that is unconditional and immeasurable. Bless our President, our Vice President, the Executive, the Judiciary, and the Legislative branch of this government. Bless especially the Senate and every family represented here, as we carefully give back to you all the glory, all the honor, and all the praise. In the name that is above every name, in the name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Everybody agree and say amen. Amen. Thank you.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Hontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Subiri, Senate President Pimentel.
With 19 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journals of the 88th session, Tuesday, May 30, 2017, and the second session, Tuesday, July 25, 2017, and consider the same as approved.
There is a motion to dispense with the reading of two journals and consider them as approved. Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, we'd like to welcome some guests in the gallery. We have the displaced students of Mindanao State University, Marawi City, taking up BS International Relations with their professor, Professor Yalud R. Abdul. These 84 students are currently on their OJT with the DFA. We also have visitors of Senator Subiri and Senator Pacquiao, Ms. Celine Pialao of MMDA MMDA, Mr. Bong Nebriha, and Mr. Jun Bialo, all of MMDA, and the Ateneo de Davao University fourth-year AB Political Science class with their advisor, Mr. Ramon Mileno III, and visitors of Senator Nancy Binay, the Purong Barangays, Juliet Licudo, and the barangay councilors and officers of Barangay 375, Zone 38, District 3 of Santa Cruz, Manila. I would like to welcome them to the Senate, Mr. President.
Welcome to all of our guests.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved. Secretary.
Messages from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 24 July 2017, it adopted House Concurrent Resolution number 11 entitled Concurrent Resolution providing for the Senate and the House of Representatives to hold a joint session to hear the message of the President of the Republic of the Philippines, in which it requests the concurrence of the Senate.
To the archives.
Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 24 July 2017, it adopted House Resolution number 1104 entitled Resolution informing the Senate that the quorum being present, the House of Representatives has entered upon the exercise of its function.
To the archives.
Bills on first reading. 1503, an act providing for a Bill of Rights for victims of crimes. Senator Laila De Lima.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
1504, an act institutionalizing Philippine participation in the international exhibitions of the Venice Biennial. Senator Ligarda.
To the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, Foreign Relations and Finance.
1505, an act requiring all national, regional, and provincial government hospitals to establish, operate, and maintain a dialysis ward or unit in the respective hospital and providing free dialysis treatment to indigent patients. Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development and Finance.
1506, an act mandating the conservation of Gabaldon school buildings nationwide, providing penalties for violations and appropriating funds. Therefore, Senator Ligarda.
To the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture and Finance.
1507, an act requiring the establishment of dialysis clinics in all national, regional, and provincial hospitals and providing for free dialysis treatment to indigent patients and appropriating funds. Therefore, Senator Joel Villanueva.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development and Finance.
1508, an act mandating the requisite proportion of Filipino laborers to foreign workers, including for the purpose Book 1, Title 2 of Presidential Decree 442, otherwise known as the Labor Code of the Philippines, as amended. Senator Joel Villanueva.
To the Committee on Labor, Employment and Human Resources Development.
1509, an act amending Section 150 of Republic Act Number 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991, for the purpose of strengthening its enforcement and implementation. Senator Win Gatchalian.
To the Committees on Local Government and Ways and Means.
1510, an act establishing the Filipino Identification System, providing funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator Richard Gordon.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Finance.
439, resolution declaring the Senate Committee on Finance to look into the recovery, reconstruction, and rehabilitation plans of Task Force Bangon Marawi for Marawi City and all other areas affected by the ongoing conflict. Senator Ligarda.
To the Committee on Finance.
440, resolution directing the appropriate Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the state of the Seed Industry Development Program and the implementation of the Seed Industry Development Act of 1992 and its implementing rules and regulations and for other purposes. Senator Cynthia Villar.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Food and Finance.
441, resolution to direct the Senate Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation and other appropriate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the complaints of various stakeholders on the implementation of Republic Act Number 10912 or the continuing Professional Development Act of 2016 with the end in view of reviewing all guidelines and procedure on the implementation of the law and proposing possible amendments to the law, the implementing rules and regulations and or the operating guidelines thereof for each profession. Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation.
442, resolution directing the Senate Committee on Accounts to investigate wastages of Senate resources caused by overstocking and obsolescence of supplies and materials inventories per Commission on Audit 2016 Annual Audit Report. Senator Lacson.
To the Committee on Accounts.
Additional reference of business bills on first reading. 1511, an act amending Section 5, Paragraph 3 of Republic Act Number 9225, otherwise known as the Citizenship Retention and Reacquisition Act of 2003. Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
1512, an act encouraging youth sector participation in the agricultural sector, establishing for the purpose Itulong Kabataan sa Agrikultura Program and Itulong Kabataan sa Agrikultura Trust Fund, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Food, Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance.
1513, an act protecting the rights of internally displaced persons and appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights, Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, and Finance.
1514, an act mandating the establishment of agri-food terminals and trading centers in every province, providing funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Food, Local Government, and Finance.
Resolution, joint Senate concurrent resolution number 7, entitled Concurrent Resolution Providing for the Legislative Calendar for the Second Regular Session of the 17th Congress of the Philippines. Senator Soto III.
To the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move for the consideration of Senate concurrent resolution number 7.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
May we ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure, Mr. President?
Secretary, please do so.
Concurrent resolution providing for the legislative calendar for the second regular session of the 17th Congress of the Philippines.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to adopt Senate concurrent resolution number 7, subject to style.
There is a motion to adopt our legislative calendar for the second regular session, which is Senate concurrent resolution number 7. Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of PS resolution number 213 under committee report number 78.
Okay. Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, this is the resolution on the model of operation and regulation of the telecommunications industry. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we are still in the period of interpellation. With that, I move to recognize the sponsor, Chair of the Committee on Economic Affairs, Senator Win Gatchalian, and ready ka na? To interpolate, Mr. President, the majority leader and then the minority leader.
Senator Gatchalian, as
Telecom.
the sponsor, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr.
And
President.
who will go ahead, sir? Minority leader or majority? The majority leader
The majority
is
leader.
recognized.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Will the distinguished gentleman from Valenzuela favor us with very few questions on the subject resolution, Mr. President?
My honor, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. My first question directly on the resolution is, how do you propose to reorganize the NTC, or the National Telecommunications Commission? What would be the changes in the current organizational structure?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. The author of the resolution intends to file a special bill that will create and substantiate the responsibilities and powers of the NTC. I think the earliest mention of NTC was during is in Republic Act number 3846, or the Radio Control Law That was the first early mention of the NTC. And because of technological changes, because of the advent of internet and other advanced technology, NTC has not kept up with the technological advances to effectively regulate these new technologies. So
The earliest mention of NTC, as you mentioned, was when? Maybe you know when.
it was hold on, Mr. Chair. Sorry. One minute suspension, Mr. Chair.
Session suspended.
Hindi ko na relegation.
1936. Nineteen 1963. Ready to resume.
Session
President.
resumed.
1963, Mr. President.
You were not born yet.
Hindi pa ho. I was born 1974.
So when NTC was mentioned, is the current structure the same?
It's still the same,
The
except
same
for some
from that time up to
modifications.
now.
And except for some modifications, Mr. President, during there were succeeding amendments in the NTC just to keep up with the changing times. But those current amendments are still not attuned to the existing technologies as well as the advent of the internet as we speak. That's why we are experiencing a lot of problems in terms of internet speed, in terms of cost. Late last year, I remember the Akamai report, which is a internationally accepted report on the internet. We're actually the slowest in Asia. And over the past few years, we have received numerous complaints as to the quality of our internet here in the country. And we concluded the fact that because of its lack in powers, internet and other services are not properly regulated. In fact, in the penal provision of NTC, any violation can only be penalized with 200 pesos a day. No? And this is actually a provision long before that was prescribed by the old law of the NTC. So hindi na ho na-update, and that's why a lot of the telcos will just choose to pay 200 pesos a day, no? Because the fines compared to the amount of revenues and profits that they gathered is really not commensurate anymore.
Very minuscule. All right. You said earlier that there would be a specific bill or hopefully a law that will address this. But can you give us more or less the changes that you would want in this the current organizational structure that we have now? What are the changes that you would want and why?
Yes.
Maybe
In a
be more a
nutshell,
little specific.
In a nutshell, Mr. President, is number one is to give it more fiscal autonomy, as in any regulator.
Autonomy.
Fiscal
Okay.
autonomy. As in any regulator, the regulator should stand on its own and should have can stand on its own, and it has to have its own budget, no? So it can operate independently and freely of politics. Number two is to put fixed tenure for the commissioners, because right now, Mr. President, the commissioners are can be changed at any given time. No? So any new administration can appoint new commissioners in the NTC. So what we propose is to give it a fixed tenure, and this will again isolate NTC from the pressures of politics. This is actually not a new concept. ERC, which is the regulator of our energy sector, has the same features. The five regulators or five commissioners of the ERC are all given tenure. We will also improve the scope of the regulatory powers of NTC. For example, regulating internet, regulating other forms of telecommunication, and also, of course, increase its power to impose penalties and fines.
When you made mention of fiscal autonomy and is that isolation I heard you use? You are speaking of the independence of the NTC.
Independence
no?
of
yes, all right.
yes.
So in the current setup, what are the specific factors that affect the independence of NTC?
From our hearings, one of the most glaring factor that affects NTC is really the appointment of the commissioners, because the lifeblood and the stability of the regulator, in this case NTC, comes from the commissioners who will be appointed by the administration or the president.
Before you go there, let me go back to the independence. I will proceed to the issue of the appointments being politicized. Let me go back to the issue on independence. You also mentioned budget. You
Yes.
said fiscal autonomy, and then you said budget. What are the factors? Presently, how is the NTC being budgeted?
The NTC right now goes through the normal procedures of our budgeting system. That means GAAs. That means they come here and they request their budget. And that goes the same for other regulators such as ERC or TRB, the Toll Regulatory Board.
They have an income, no?
They do not have their own income.
They do not?
They do not have their own income. In other jurisdictions, we studied, the regulator normally has their own revenue source, no? In different cases, no? From applications or from other processes, no? This gives it a sense of independence, no? And less pressure from politics, so they can freely make independent and strong decisions in behalf of the consumers. So this type of model of independence will be applied to the new bill, giving it a very strong sense of independence.
So what happens to the fees that they collect, the permits,
I think
stuff like that?
the fees being collected, if I understand it, forms part of their expenditures also.
Yes, it goes to the general fund. If they're not allowed to use it, then therefore it goes to
Yes.
the National Treasury.
From what I understand, Mr. President, it goes to the general fund to be appropriated
The
by
National Treasury.
by Congress.
So currently, ganun, ano? All right, let's move on to the mention of politicized appointment of commissioners. Is that how you termed it? I was reviewing the hearings. You know? How do you propose to remedy this issue or to depoliticize the appointment of its commissioners? What specific measures do you have in mind?
I think we have to set the qualifications from the very beginning. meaning we have to, the law should specify the minimum qualifications of the commissioners. For example, the commissioners might come from different fields of telecommunication, of different fields of different regulated industries. So the minimum qualification will be now the ultimate decision-making point for the appointment of the commissioners. And then another best practice really is to put tenure. So even though we will have a new administration or a new president, commissioners will stay on, and they will not be replaced whenever a new administration will come in. So they will be also given tenured.
How many commissioners do we have now?
One commissioner and 2 deputy commissioners.
And they are appointed by the president.
And they're appointed by the president.
What is their term?
At any
No
given
term.
time, they can be replaced.
They can be so who's the NTC commissioner? Still Liel?
Yes.
Cordoba?
Yeah.
Still Liel? He was appointed by
Cordova.
yes. Noy.
Yes, Commissioner Cordova.
Yes, so he's still NTC
Yes.
commissioner. So and the rest, the 2 deputy commissioners, also the presidential appointees.
Yes, yes.
You propose to have the same, but certain qualities already.
Yes, we're also actually, Mr. Chair, Mr. President, we're also thinking of expanding, from 3 commissioners to 5 commissioners. I think the logic to expanding it from 3 to 5 is to attract more talent in the commissioner level. For example, we can appoint engineers, lawyers, or economists. This will actually diversify the knowledge base of the commission, because regulating a telecom industry cuts across different types of subject matter. You have economics, you have financial, of course you have the law and engineering. So I think the intention really here is to broaden the knowledge base, so when they make decisions, every facet of the telecommunication industries will be covered.
Well, there might be a perspective of that enlarging the bureaucracy instead, but nevertheless, we can discuss that at
Yes.
the proper time. No,
Yes,
not now. Okay.
when we propose the law, that
When
can
you
be...
propose the law, all right.
Yeah.
Now, earlier, I understand this was done in the committee hearing. The NTC officials declared that the current available spectrum allocations are enough to accommodate new entrants in the industry, the telecommunications industry. But according to the chair, according to the distinguished gentleman from Valenzuela, based on what I read, such statement is false. It is not true. Which is which?
I think we have to distinguish, Mr. President, the type of spectrum that will be needed to run a profitable telecommunications company. Spectrum might be available, that's correct, but to be profitable, this is where the problem comes in, because what we call the bread and butter, or the workhorse spectrum, which is the 900 megahertz, as well as the 1800 megahertz, as I demonstrated before, are totally non-existent anymore, because these 2 workhorse frequencies, meaning the call and text, every time you call, every time you text, it uses the 900 and the 1800 megahertz spectrum. These are completely owned by the 2 telcos. So what is left actually are spectrum for data, but as we all know right now, data is still at quite a infancy stage, or a new service. So what happens if a new telco company wants to come in, it has to
They cannot avail of 900.
it cannot avail of
megahertz.
the 900 and 1800 anymore. So if you remember one time, I think this is WeTribe, there's this telecom company called WeTribe who tried to compete by just offering data. Wala siyang call and text. But it didn't I think it didn't last for 2 or 3 years because it couldn't compete solely on data services alone. It has to have that traditional call and text. And that traditional call and text frequencies are totally unavailable anymore.
No, all right. Now, according to your investigation, there was a joint request of Smart and Globe for the approval of their co-use agreement on the 700 megahertz frequencies. And it was approved by NTC just 3 days from the date of the request. Is there anything or is there something unusual in this procedure, and have you investigated this already?
Actually, because this exact subject matter is now under litigation by the Philippine Competition Commission, we left it to the PCC to conduct its own inquiry and investigation with this subject matter. I think since they have already filed the case and researched deeply into this matter, I think we decided that we will let PCC do its work in terms of coming out with whether this is a anti-competitive strategy of the telecom companies. However, during the course of retrieving information and processing information, we took note that that 700 megahertz, which was subject of a purchase, to get that approved, to get that up and running, you have to get it approved first by NTC. And we noticed that the dates, I think it was took them only two or 3 days for NTC to approve. We took notice of that because this is such an important transaction that will change the landscape of our telecom industry. And as I mentioned also over the speech, part of that 700 megahertz are the workhorse frequencies, which are the 900 and the 1800
Yes.
megahertz. Package deal ho siya.
900 and the 18.
18.
All right. The 700 right now, what is being used?
The 700 po is, just to give just to give the bodies an idea, the 700 megahertz is owned 33% by Globe, 32% by Smart, and 35% by NTC.
Again, sorry. Globe 30.
Globe is 33%, Smart is 32%, and NTC is 35%. Pero po pag
Hindi owned ito. Pinapahiram, pinapahiram
Yes,
natin.
pinahiram lang.
Pinapahiram ng gobyerno.
It's a privilege to use. Allocated is the right
Okay.
word.
And
then,
is it being used?
that's a very good question, Mr. President. In the deal, what was represented in the NTC was, at one point in time, I think 1 year after they approved the co-use, there should be a substantial improvement in the service of our of Globe and Smart. No? Meaning yung data services natin should substantially improve. And that 1 year ended, I think, May 27, 2017. This representation as NTC, when you say substantially improve, what is your measure? No, because you can only say there's an improvement if you measure it, no? Because or else it's very difficult to define. And it was also disclosed to the committee that the measure that NTC use is not so clear to, or it's not an international method, no? I think they also use third-party reports to come up with their own conclusion. In fact, in that same hearing, they also disclosed that there is no baseline measure. No? So meaning, hindi natin alam kung saan nag-uumpisa. So this is really quite a anomalous response, no less than from the regulator, because the regulator should make sure that they know what they are measuring. No? And this is where we also want to maybe continue when we file the bill on the reorganization of NTC, to really strengthen also the capacity of NTC so that they will know exactly what they are measuring, and they will also have that capability of measuring and not rely on third-party information to regulate our industry. They have to have their own capability.
All right. Just before I go on, kindly refresh my memory. Philippines and I understand the United States and other countries use 900 and 1800, di ba?
For call and
Megahertz.
text po.
How about Japan?
For Japan, I think
What are they using?
in the list of spectrum, the way I understand it, the 700 and the 850 megahertz are the data megahertz, no? The way I understand it. But in our country, because still bulk of our users are still the call and text users.
Yes.
The most lucrative frequencies are the 900 and the 1800.
yeah.
So you have to have ang ginagawa ho, binabalance nila. They have the data spectrum, and they also have the bread and butter spectrum. So at least you can hedge, no, one spectrum
but
to the
Japan
other.
is using 700?
I think from what I understand, 700 po. 700.
Yeah. Because before I remember, as I said, I wanted my memory refreshed, because as I remember before, our phones some years ago would not function in Japan. Our cell phones would not function. No? You'll have to get a phone from there, from
Right.
Japan.
If I'm not mistaken, Mr. President, at that point in time, there was still a choice, a big divide whether to use GSM or the CDMA format. And I think at that time,
Yes, yeah,
Japan
now I
was
remember,
using
yes.
the
GSM,
CDMA
GSM.
format.
Now I remember. Thank you. Now, earlier we both agreed that they do not own these frequencies. No, they are merely being given the privilege of using it. Now, in your speech, and as I distinctly remember, I would like to quote your speech. In your sponsorship speech, you said, private corporations have treated spectrum allocations as their property, resulting in relatively easy and effective spectrum trading via corporate mergers and acquisitions, as in the recent case of the joint acquisition of the 700 megahertz frequencies. Now, to continue, you quoted, I will quote you, the damage caused by such spectrum trading to the industry is immense. Now, Mr. President, when you say the damage caused by such spectrum trading to the industry is immense, what do you mean by that? Can you quantify the gravity of the damage to the telecommunications industry? Did we incur any losses?
Actually, the losses there are more on opportunity losses, Mr. President. I mentioned also in the speech, there's a term called digital divide, wherein because of poor services, some of our poor constituents are getting the raw end of the deal. And I think in many third world countries right now, the telecommunication industry is becoming a tool to fight poverty. Like for example, internet e-commerce or internet commerce, buying and selling through your phone. And this is actually where the damage comes in, because instead of pulling people out of poverty because of these poor services, we are actually regressing, a majority part of our society. That statement actually, in a perfect setting, if a telco company is not using their spectrum, it's really actually the government's responsibility to take it back. Kung hindi mo ginamit, pinahiram lang naman yan sa'yo, balik mo sa amin. No, it's not it's not for you to sell it or to split it. In this case, hinati po eh. It's not for you to decide whether to sell it or to split it. But it's the state should get it back and sell it again or give it to another player who can effectively use it. No? Because it's owned by state. No? It's owned by the Filipino people.
Do you think the current subscribers of Globe and Smart would be in any way disadvantaged or inconvenienced if, for example, there would be a reallocation of spectrum?
I don't think.
Let's say, if there is a new entrant or a third player?
I don't think so, Mr. President. I just don't have the slides, no. But I wish I have the slides. But just in a nutshell, no, Japan, NTT Docomo, which is the biggest telecom company in Japan, and definitely much faster services, has twice less spectrum than the two telcos we have right here. So, in other words, with less spectrum, you can deliver a better service. But what's happening right now here in our country is because telcos treat their spectrum as their own, it's actually selling one spectrum to the other in order to also fortify their position in the telecom industry. So, I said earlier, the 900 and the 1800 megahertz are the bread and butter spectrum. Let me just...
Talk and text.
Talk and text. Let me just give you an idea of the allocation of this spectrum. For 900, Globe has 64% and Smart has 36%. Pag in-add ho to, that's 100%. In 1800, Globe has 40% and Smart has 60%. That's 100%. So what happened is, effectively na-lock out na ho, no, yung potential third player. No? In other spectrum, yes, it's correct that there are spectrum available. But again, no, in that bread and butter workhorse spectrum, doon po nagkaroon ng lockout.
Now, in the recent years, say at least in the last 5 years, were there any third player that attempted to enter the telecommunications industry in the country?
From what I understand, Mr. President, before the purchase of that 700 megahertz, there was a third player that owns this, and it also has a suite of different spectrum that can compete in different levels. No? So I think I'm not very sure what happened, but I think the conclusion there was to just sell out to the two major telecom companies. No? I don't know if it's because of viability or because of lack of capital.
So we do not know the reason why this operations did not push through?
I'm not very particularly sure of the reason why that third entity decided to just sell their spectrums.
Anyway, Mr. President, considering all your recommendations and policy recommendations which we heard in your sponsorship speech and the proposed legislative agenda you will be filing, assuming that all this will be in place and enacted into law, could our internet speed be par with at least, or not at least, with South Korea, which is currently the top country in the world with fastest average connection? How far are we from that?
In the 2017 first quarter report by Akamai, South Korea has an average of 28.6 Mbps. The Philippines has 5.5 Mbps. So the gap is about 23.1 Mbps. Medyo malayo ho talaga.
Malayo.
South Korea is actually number one.
Iniisip natin na gawin na ito. May pag-asa pa tayong umangat dyan.
I think with effective regulation, effective policy execution, I think we can actually improve the services of our telecom sector. Whether it's a policy of attracting a third player or just making sure that they deliver on the promises, or making sure that they use the spectrum allocated to them. What is very important here is that regulator that will make sure that the interest of the consumer is always at the forefront.
All right, thank you. We thank the
you.
sponsor, Mr. President, of the resolution. We hope that we will look forward to the legislative proposal that you will be filing. So I will terminate my interpellation. May we now recognize the Minority Leader, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
Before I recognize the Minority Leader, can I ask a question related to the last sentence uttered by the sponsor? You mentioned the regulator. What's wrong with the current regulator? Has it been captured by the industry it is regulating?
I think, Mr. President, the services will speak for itself. No, I mean, I think everyone knows what kind of services that we get, no, in our cell phones and in our homes. So, and that's really the job of the regulator, to make sure that customer interest is always at the forefront. And in this case, we're not getting the best end of our bargain.
The Minority Leader is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Will the gentleman continue to yield the floor for just a few questions?
Yes, yes, Mr. President, it's an honor.
And I will pick up from where the Senate President started. The Senate President asked the question, what is wrong with the present regulator? Would the gentleman sponsor agree if we say that today we have a situation where the regulated regulates the regulator?
Parang ganun na ho nangyayari ho talaga.
Yes.
Mr. President, I think confusing as it may sound, but I think that's what's happening. That's what's happening right now, Mr.
Because
President.
if we can encapsulize in that in those few words, I think what the situation is today, where the regulated, meaning the telco industry, could be perceived as regulating the NTC, which is the regulator. So that's why I picked up from where the Senate President started, and maybe summarized it with a very simple sentence, that we have a situation where the regulated is regulating the regulator.
I think that is a
You agree with
very apt summary. And may just add a brief statement, Mr. President. In industries like this, where natural monopolies exist, no, it's really the motivation of these companies to make maximum profit for their shareholders. And in the process of making maximum profit or maximum return, it's more often than not, it's the consumers that pay the price. You know? And that's where the regulator should come in. And we have to make sure that the regulators are stable, strong, and oriented towards the protection of our consumers. And this is actually where the problem comes in. And I 100% agree with the gentleman from Iloilo that in this case, it's the other way around that's happening.
Thank you, Mr. President. At least it's a good starting point that all of us in this chamber agree that maybe we start looking at the structure that regulates this industry, which is so critical to our advancement of our economy. And I congratulate the sponsor for bringing this out in his recommendations, although we eagerly await the proposed legislation. By the way, Mr. President, we have no objections to the report, and we will certainly vote for it. But is it my understanding that a set of proposed measures will be submitted by the committee?
Yes, Mr. President. We will be submitting a few remedial legislation to this effect, starting with the reorganization of the NTC, giving it a stronger mandate, better reach, and updating its powers to be attuned to the telecommunications technologies such as the internet and broadband, and also updating its penal provisions. As we speak right now, they can only impose 200 pesos a day fine to erring telecommunication industry, which is really a minuscule. However, those proposals will probably fall under a different committee, not the Committee on Economic Affairs, but I think the objective really here is to really push reforms in the telecommunication industry. So it doesn't really matter which committee will handle that.
Yeah, so, okay, that's an interesting point. The bill that may be filed by the committee as a consequence of the approval of this committee report may fall under the jurisdiction of a different committee. Just procedurally, I don't want to prolong this, but what if the committee does not agree with the recommendation of the committee of Senator Gatsalian, which is approved by the Senate? Just procedurally, how do we handle this?
As the principal author of that of those proposed legislation, I think we will just have to defend very hard and demonstrate to the committee chairman and the committee on public services the rationale for those proposed legislation. And since we have undertaken 3 hearings, complete with information, data, and evidences, we will demonstrate through empirical evidences to the Committee on Public Services why we need all of this remedial legislation.
All right. So we will just probably look at this again with more detail once that bill is filed. But just going through some of the committee recommendations, the first recommendation in order to reform the NTC is first it must be reorganized and given fiscal autonomy. What exactly does the good sponsor mean by fiscal autonomy?
One of the, aside from the hearings that we conducted, we also took a look at the different regulators in different jurisdictions, and we found out that part of strengthening a regulator is giving it fiscal independence, meaning it can generate its own revenues, keep its own revenues, and spend it in the process of regulation. And at the same time, one of the most important, and this is actually not so well published in the to the public, is to strengthen the capacity of the regulators, because this is an ever-evolving industry. Telecommunications this year this will look very different next year, and one of the things that we have to do is to make sure that the capacity of our regulators always attuned to technology. So one of the things that we are proposing is to let it keep a portion of its generated revenues, and to give it a sense of fiscal autonomy.
Well, Mr. President, we raise that question because fiscal autonomy as a power is found in the Constitution, and the constitutional bodies enjoy this fiscal autonomy. Who are these bodies? You have the Senate, the House, the Judiciary, the constitutional commissions. Now, and the Ombudsman. These are the constitutional bodies which enjoy fiscal autonomy. And under decided cases of the Supreme Court, fiscal autonomy means Number one, basically, the automatic release of the amounts appropriated under the General Appropriations Act for that agency. In other words, what the Constitution contemplated was that those enjoying fiscal autonomy must not come around the executive begging for the releases of funds. That is why there is autonomy, because the funds are automatically released. Congress retains the right to appropriate, but once it is appropriated, the executive cannot withhold its releases in order that the beneficiary agency will automatically receive these allocations without need of any bureaucratic action from the executive branch. So these are now under our Constitution reserved for constitutional agencies. I am not aware of any agency which are not provided for the Constitution which enjoys fiscal autonomy as defined by the Supreme Court. Is it the intention of the good sponsor that in crafting legislation, fiscal autonomy will have the same meaning?
More or less, Mr. President. The intention really is to allow the regulator to keep partial of its revenues and allow it to also allocate its revenues for its operation. So meaning it will also now be independent or it will be independent of political pressure or independent also of pressure coming from outside its regulatory functions. So what the intention really here is to somehow shield, the regulator from pressure that can hamper or affect its decision making.
Good intention, but we have to work within the system that we have today. For example, use of income is accepted in the budget. There are some agencies which are allowed to use for its operations income which they generate in the course of their operations, or a portion thereof. A portion of the income can be used for capital outlay, etc. But in this particular case, the Congress in effect delegates to the agency the authority to appropriate by allowing the use of income. That can be done. If that is if that's what is contemplated, I think it can be achieved. But to go one step further and say that it should also be automatically released may pose some policy issues and problems, because then this deprives the executives of the executive branch of control over an executive agency. NTC is part of the executive branch. If we say automatically released, that the funds it earns is automatically released to them, that to me would infringe on the control of the executive over an agency in the executive branch, and therefore could raise some constitutional issues. Of course, the policy issue is also something that we must resolve. All other agencies, or a few other agencies, or probably dozens of agencies in this government, can claim to be similarly situated and ask for fiscal autonomy, meaning automatic use of resources, they and without any intervention of Congress, and automatic release of these funds to them without any intervention on the part of the executive. I think both on policy and constitutional grounds, a lot of issues can be raised, but we will have to await how this fiscal autonomy concept, as proposed in the committee, by the committee in its recommendation, will be translated into an actual law or proposed law when the bill comes up for deliberation.
Point well taken, Mr. President. And during our hearings, we also took note of NTC's quasi-judicial powers, making very important decisions for the consumers. And one of the recommendations that we set forth really is to isolate the regulator from pressure when it makes very important decisions, especially decisions that will entail huge amounts of money. However, I think the good gentleman from Iloilo raised a very strong and valid point, and we will surely take note of the complexities that may arise from this proposal.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, because the situation or the functions of the NTC as a quasi-judicial body is replicated in the bureaucracy so many times. You just standing here, the Securities and Exchange Commission can claim to be a quasi-judicial body, and so many agencies of government. So we must be very careful when we now start crafting this because of these policy and constitutional issues. As I said, we would want to look for a model of a non-constitutional body enjoying fiscal autonomy as defined in by our Supreme Court. And right now, this judge representation could not think of any model that would fit the proposed structure of the NTC. But we will await the
Yes,
legislation.
Mr. President. We will also look at the regulators in the other industries, such as toll roads, water, and we will study their
Yes.
structure.
Yes. Well, yes, Mr. Chairman. So I guess we will just have to await the appropriate bill that will be submitted and debate the specific provisions at that time. At this point, I have no objections to the adoption of this committee report, but we should be just aware that if another committee handles the proposed legislation, the issue is, if we adopt this report, is that committee now bound by the action of the Senate, or can it submit something different? These are that's the issues this is the policy issue that we must resolve, but let me go on record, Mr. President, that we have no objections to the Chamber adopting this report at the appropriate time. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the gentleman, to Senator Gatchalian for accommodating our questions.
I thank the gentleman from Iloilo for for raising very good points and for giving us some ideas on improving our proposal, and definitely will submit I think 3 or 4 proposals to strengthen the regulator in the telecommunication industry, as well as to ultimately improve the services of our telecoms here in our country. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Sponsor, one question. You gave us some features of this anticipated bill that you will file. More powers. What else? I think you enumerated at least 4 elements. But what will happen to the personnel, the people?
In the other regulators, no, such as ERC, ERC was the defunct ERB, no, Energy Regulatory Board, wherein they adopted the same workforce to the new regulator. It's only the structure that changed. Also, the commissioner level and the top management levels were changed, but the entire bureaucracy remains the same, except for some fine-tuning of the responsibilities.
So there will be changes at the top level.
There'll be changes at the top level and also the responsibilities at the working level.
Thank you very much for
Thank you,
that
Mr. President.
answer.
Thank you. Mr.
Majority Leader.
President, Senator Ontiveros wishes to interpolate, but on Monday. So I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 213, or Senate Resolution 213 under Committee Report 78.
Is there any objection? There being none, we suspend consideration.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1466 under Committee Report 104.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, this is the act prohibiting the imposition of expiry dates on gift checks, certificates, or cards by issuer and for other purposes. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we are now in the period of interpellation. So may we recognize the sponsor, Chairman of the Committee on Trade and Commerce, Senator Mig Subiri.
The sponsor, Senator Subiri, is recognized.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
And the minority leader will interpellate, but in the meantime, I move to suspend the session for a few minutes. Mr.
Session
President.
is suspended. Tama.
Today, there are gift checks containing expiry date.
Same here, same here.
Yan pala gusto niya eh. Kala ko kape. Pinadala ko kayo ng kape.
Ready to resume, Mr.
Session
President.
is resumed.
Mr. President, before the suspension, we have before the body Committee Report 104. So Senator Mick Subiri is the chairman of the Committee on Trade to sponsor and to interpolate the Minority Leader, Senator Frank Rilon.
Senator Subiri, Senator Drilon are both recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman sponsor yield to a few questions?
Absolutely, Your Honor. Thank you.
It is my understanding from the Majority Leader and the Senate President that because of the inclement weather, this is the last item that we will take up for this session. We have agreed, Mr. President, provided the issuer of this committee report will issue the chamber gift checks. I wonder if that is feasible, but nevertheless, even if he does not, we are in support of this bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. My Christmas gifts will be in the forms of gift checks. Don't worry.
Anyway,
Not expiring.
thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you,
President.
sir.
And to start with, can we spread to the record what is the policy that we want to enshrine in this proposed measure once it becomes law?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, for the gentleman of Iloilo, gentleman from Iloilo, the policy really is to compute to promote the general welfare, consumer welfare of our general public. You know, many times and many years have passed where gift checks have been issued by large establishments like SM, Robinsons, Rustan's, and other establishments. And the number one complaint during our hearing was because of the expiry date, minsan hindi nila nagagastos lahat at what happens is their money is lost on a transaction that has already been paid, on a service that has been paid, and yet it cannot be utilized, it cannot be collected after this expiry date. So we did this, Your Honors, to be able to protect the consumers from this problem of expiry dates, Your Honor.
Okay. So it's a consumer protection measure.
That's correct, Your Honor.
Mr. President, we can fully appreciate that in the ordinary, the usual practice is that if I want to give the gentleman from Bukidnon a gift check, I go to the establishment, I give them 1,000 pesos, and then I get a gift check worth 1,000 and would give it to the gentleman. Right now, there is an expiration date. Mr. President, there are times when, you know, during parties or celebration of an anniversary, the sponsoring organization will raffle, for example, a 2-night stay in, say, in a hotel with a partner. I know that before the gentleman got married, he really watches out for these kinds of
I used to pray for those gifts.
Raffles. But would this law cover that practice so that if a raffle should not contain also an expiry date?
Oh, nga. I think under this particular measure, it's not covered, Your Honor. It's not covered because if it's unless the sponsoring agency would put it as a gift check, like it will be a written certificate, it's possible. But if it's verbal and it's just
no, it's not verbal. There's a, you know, so there's a raffle in an anniversary party of a company,
that should be
and then one of the prizes is this entitles the holder to 3-night stay in Makati Shangri-La. This card expires on December 31,
yes.
2017. Is that covered by this?
At the way it is worded in our version, no, Your Honor. But we could include it because what we're trying to protect are those who paid in cash for these gift checks.
I have no problems with that policy. May I just suggest that that the committee think out of that amendment, which will make clear that the situation covered is when you purchase it as to be given as a gift. But just be careful, because when I win in a raffle, where the raffle is a gift check, whether in form of hotel accommodation,
tickets,
dinner,
trips for two abroad.
The question is, you cannot. The law would include the prohibition against such situation.
Yes.
Does it or should it not? That is the policy issue which I am asking the committee to think out, and when the appropriate committee amendments would come, you propose an amendment and we'll just examine it. I have no basic objection. As long as you just make it clear.
Kung kasama ba sila o hindi itong mga
the coverage of the law. But because if you just leave it at that, it will be covered.
Yes. Yes. We'll clarify it, sir. We'll clarify it, Mr. President.
Please clarify. Okay.
In the committee amendments.
Second issue. The law under the measure, the proposed measure under Section 5 says prohibition. It shall be unlawful to issue a gift check, certificate, card that bears an expiry date. The imposition of expiry date on the stored value, credit, or balance of the gift check, certificate, card shall likewise be unlawful. All right, it is unlawful, and therefore the penalty is provided in Section 8. It says, any person who violates the provisions of this act shall, upon conviction, be subject to a fine of not less than 50,000, but not more than 1 million pesos. Who is liable for this? Who is, when you say the person, who is the person liable? In a corporation, there are a lot of persons. In fact, a person can be a juridical entity, which is a corporation. But I do not know if that is the contemplation. Maybe that is not the contemplation of the bill about not only natural person, but the question we raise is, since it is unlawful, who is the person who commits the unlawful act?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. President, we discussed this earlier during the break. And right now, it's the issuer or any, and under the definition of terms, any juridical entity that provides the instrument that holds value for which consumer goods or services will be exchanged. And Senator Duron is perfectly correct during the break when we discussed, but you cannot jail the juridical entity, you cannot jail the corporation. So will it be the issuing officer? Will it be the president? And therefore, during the committee amendments, we propose certain amendments, committee amendments, to clarify that particular provision. And to remove the word conviction, we also agreed to remove the word conviction and leave it as a penalty that will be implemented by the Department of Trade and Industry, if that is acceptable to
Yes.
Senator Duron.
You mentioned that in the Department of Trade and Industry, because if you use the word conviction, it would appear like you are going through a trial.
Yes, that's correct, Your Honor.
And somebody acts as a judge who would impose the appropriate penalty and would convict and impose the appropriate penalty. So you get into a lot of legal issues and practical application. That's why I asked the question, who do you convict? When the issuer is a corporation, are you going to convict the president? That might be, the president might say, I did not even know that there was this gift card issued. This was issued by my marketing director. Why should I be held responsible? Yes. So it causes a lot of vagueness, which I feel that can be corrected by the committee, which should be corrected by the committee. So I'm glad that the committee recognizes that, and the appropriate time will await the proposed amendments to clarify that second issue. The third issue that we wish to raise is, what is the rule insofar as existing gift checks are concerned which contain an expiry date? Example, today as we talk, there are gift cards which contain an expiry date of December 31, say 2017. Are these automatically, is the expiration date automatically deleted as a consequence of
The law.
of this bill if it passes into law?
The minority floor leader, Mr. President, is absolutely correct.
As always, Mr. President.
Well, he is one of our legal luminaries in the chamber, but he's absolutely correct in that observation. And we'd like, in the proper time, to put a committee amendment to include all gift checks that are already in public hands. And I think this is also the idea of those who complained to us in the committee when we had the hearing, is all the gift checks were about to expire within the next month or so, or the next 6 months. So we will put an ipso facto clause here, or a section, which will automatically cover their gift checks, all those with those gift checks, gift cards on hand now. Your Honor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sponsor, for recognizing that issue as valid, and the appropriate amendment will be issued. But just to go back again to the concept, again, I want to emphasize that we must be very clear on the coverage. A gift check, I would receive gift checks from a restaurant,
Yes.
and say this entitles you to a meal.
Yes.
Huh? And then it has an expiry date. I assume this is not covered, or is this covered? Huh?
In the bill, it's not covered. We only put the promotional. It falls under loyalty and promotional activities of a company. So it won't be covered, Your Honor. So restaurant, meals in restaurants and the like.
Yeah. Well, I just gave us an example, restaurant meals, but it can take all other forms, which really should not be covered, but which, unless we are very precise
Yes.
and precise in the language,
Yes.
we may unduly punish those which are not intended to be
agreed.
covered by the law.
Maybe
I
during
would
the-
suggest that just a concept,
Yes.
where the gift certificate is backed up, for lack of a better term, is backed up by monetary considerations, meaning that if you buy a gift check,
Yes.
if you purchase a gift check in exchange for money or value that should not have an expiry date.
Yes, sir.
But
Yes, Your Honor.
a gift check, which is given to, which an owner of an establishment would give, really as a gift.
Yes.
It's called a gift check, but obviously should not be included in this bill, as we agree. But the bill should be clear that that is the intention.
Yes.
Otherwise, you can be subjected to a lot of misinterpretation, unless it is already so provided here.
What we'll do in Section 4, Your Honor, Mr. President, on definition and coverage, we'll make it much more specific. And we could give examples as
Here
well.
for a monetary consideration.
It's for the monetary consideration. It's in the last paragraph of Section 4. But we can make it even more specific to include examples. So that way it won't be misconstrued or confused with other transactions.
Yeah, okay, that is all for, we thank the gentleman for accommodating us on these questions, and we have no more questions on this period, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Sponsor.
The present bill already captures that, the last concept raised by Senator Dillon, that
Yes, Your
there
Honor,
will be
but,
no harm if we
but we amend
clarify.
it. We can clarify and make it more specific.
But since Majority Leader, can I just raise one
Yes.
short point? Since the sponsor already cited Section 4, can you look at your definition of issuer? Because if you limit it to juridical entity, that implies only to corporations.
That's
May-
correct,
but
Your Honor. We
there
will
might
amend
be
that.
there might be a non-corporation issuer.
Yes,
so
sir.
please.
We will amend that to make it more specific
Yes,
and,
thank you.
and clarify
Thank you very much. Thank you.
the amendment.
Majority
Thank you. And I'd
Leader?
like to thank, Mr. President, I'd like to thank
Yes.
the Minority Floor Leader for his observations and inputs. It will be very helpful to make this bill very relevant to the needs of our consumers, especially particularly those who utilize gift checks during the holiday season and all throughout the year. Maraming salamat po, Your Honor.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader.
there are no members of the Senate who have informed your committee if they will interpolate. So I move to close the period of interpolation on Committee Report 104, Senate Bill 1466.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1466 under Committee Report 104.
Is there an objection? There being none, approved.
Mr. President, upon request of Senator Angara and after getting the approval of the Senate President, may I move the reorganization of the composition of the following oversight committees of the Committee on Ways and Means as follows. For the Congressional Oversight Committee on the Comprehensive Tax Reform Package, for the majority, Senator Angara, Senator Villar, Senator Ejercito, and Senator Villanueva. For the minority, Senator Drilon. For the Congressional Oversight Committee of the Official Development Assistance, majority, Angara, Recto, Zubiri, Gatchalian, Gordon, and for the minority, Pangilinan, Hontiveros. For the
Can we
Congressional...
proceed one by one, Majority
I'm sorry.
Leader, because it will become a compound motion.
Yes,
So,
sorry.
so
For the Congressional Oversight Committee on Comprehensive Tax Reform Package, Angara, Villar, Ejercito, Villanueva, minority, Senator Dillon. So move, Mr. President.
So is this amounts to a reorganization of the said committee? Okay, there's a
Yes,
motion to reorganize the said committee with the senators named as members. Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
For the Congressional Oversight Committee on the Official Development Assistance, for the majority, Angara, Recto, Subiri, Gatchalian, Gordon, and for the minority, Pangilinan, Ontiveros. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
For the Congressional Oversight Committee on Customs and Tariff Act, for the majority, Angara, Ejercito, Villanueva, Legarda. For the minority, Senator Dillon.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. We received a letter from Senator Hontiveros to request that Senate Bill 1482, entitled An Act Providing for a National Policy in Preventing Teenage Pregnancies, Institutionalizing Social Protection for Teenage Parents, and Providing Funds therefore, was previously referred to the Committee on Health, and the motion is to move to the referral to the Committee on Women and Children, Family Relations, Gender Equality as the primary committee, Mr. President, making the Committee on Health the secondary committee.
Did we comply with our understanding that the chairman of the Committee on Health should be consulted?
Yes, he was consulted, and we were informed that he agrees, Mr. President.
So there's a motion now to transfer Senate Bill number 1482. Isn't it correct?
1482.
From the Committee on Health to the Committee on Women. Okay, is there any objection? Senator Dillon.
Not an objection, but I just want to place a record that we are doing this because this is consistent with the definition of the jurisdiction of the committees in our rules. Just for the record.
They are, Mr. President.
But sometimes it happens that really there are really subject matters which can
Overlap.
There is no problem about that. That's an overlapping,
Yes.
but as long as it is in the jurisdiction of one of the committees to whom
Yes,
the
sir.
measure was referred to, that should be consistent with the rules. Well, in other words, what we're just saying, Mr. President, is that the transfer of referral should be based on the jurisdiction as defined in our rules, not because a member of our chamber wanted to hear that particular.
Yes, sir. But my point is the first referral was also correct under
Correct.
the description of the jurisdiction of the committee. But there are really subject matters which can, which are so flexible that they can be referred to multiple committees.
As long as it falls within the jurisdiction of several committees,
Yes,
I
sir.
think who the lead committee will be is a matter of precedent and decision of the chamber. But where there is absolutely no basis, and
Correct.
In a colleague of ours just wants that that a particular measure be transferred from one committee to the other, I would put of record that I have serious reservations about
Yes.
that, and will so object on the record if that happens.
That's
Yes.
correct.
We assure the minority leader we will not allow that, Mr. President.
That's why I will always pause and ask, is there any objection before we approve the motion? So is there any objection to the pending motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn the session until
Before we
3.
do that,
Senator Dillon is recognized.
We were consulted by the majority on the membership of the minority on the Oversight Committee on Tariff and Customs. We assigned the oversight to Senator Aquino, but the majority leader named this representation as the minority representative. With the concurrence of the majority leader, may we propose that the minority be represented by Senator Aquino instead of this representation, and so we move for reconsideration of the approval of that oversight committee.
We have no objection to the motion to reconsider, Mr. President, the membership of the Congressional Oversight Committee on Customs and Tariff Act.
Okay. By,
So moved.
by replacing Senator Drilon with Senator Aquino. Any?
Yes.
So we are reconsidering the
Yes.
earlier approved motion. Any objection? Hearing none, with the motion to
Reconsider.
constitute Congressional Oversight Committee on Customs and Tariff Act is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I move to adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, July 31, 2017.
Is there any objection? There being none, session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, July 31, 2017.